Okay, here we are. So, hi everyone. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Welcome to the first session of the UNDP and UNSD data visualization and communication training. Uh, this is the last mile of our data visualization journey. We started with a session on the process of data visualization and design thinking, where we touched based on the basics of data visualizations, some good practices, do's and don'ts when creating charts and graphs. And we also touched based on some fundamentals of the geospatial work. In the second session, we saw classic tools and resources that we can use to create effective visualizations with basic coding knowledge. We explored the UNDP data visualization tool, the UNDP GeoHub, and other tools like Flourish. In the third session, you explored some open source libraries for creating more advanced and customized visuals. And we are now at the last session where we'll see about communication and outreach products. So how you can, together with your visuals, communicate a data story. The facilitators for this session will be Farial, Nicolas, and myself. Everybody's from UNSD, but as I said, this training is a joint training with also UNDP. Our colleague from UNDP introduced the other sessions. So this is the outline for today. We will start with an introduction where we will tell you why we need to tell stories and why we need this new step into our data visualization journey. We will touch base on why objectivity matters. We will talk about the comparison between a data and a story. And we will give you some good practices and points for creating a good data story. Then I will hand over to my colleague Nicolas, who will explain how to write your first data story. We will give you the framework under the data storytelling, which is the pyramid model. And we will give you the steps that you have to follow to create your first story. So define the audience, your message, choose your supporting evidence, add examples, and adapt for social media to communicate your data story to the audience. We will also give you some resources that you can explore at the end of this training to create your story. What are the objectives of this module? So the objective is to equip the members of the National Statistical System with the skills to create data stories. So at the end of the training, you'll be able to define your audience, so understand the person you're speaking to and tailor the message to the audience. You will be able to define your key message and supporting evidence. You will be able to understand what are the relevant insight and the data points to create a story. And you will be able to write the story in a clear way and create visual elements that can support your story and can help you in promoting your story. So in the previous modules, we talked a lot about data visualization, and we explore how data visualization can help in giving the data life. So we saw that visuals make data more accessible and engaging, and of course, they can help in revealing trends, patterns of relationships that might be difficult to identify at the first sight. So statisticians create these charts and graphs, hoping that the audience will digest the numbers the same way as they do. But sometimes if we don't give the audience also the background, the story behind the data, it's difficult for them to understand why this data matters. So we need also some context and narration. Why we need context? Because we need, as I said, to accompany the data with the background, and we have to explain why the data matter and what to do with this information that we are explaining. Why we need narration? Because we need to guide the audience into the key insights. So when we can combine both context and narration and the visuals, we are able not only to give the audience clear information and usable information, but also more memorable information. In the diagram here, you can see the different components of data storytelling. So we have, of course, a data component. So you, of course, have to follow the data analytics process. So you have to collect the data, explore the data, and analyze the data. But you have to complete this journey also with the design process, so the visualization and the creation of the visuals, and with the narrative and context part that I just explained. So to summarize, narration can provide the context, but visuals can simplify and enhance the message. So it's important that the two elements live together. But what is data storytelling? Data storytelling is a discipline that is communicating information through text and visual. It's a multidisciplinary approach because it includes data analytics components and in addition, we also have the narrative and the context part. But what we are talking about stories, why we need to tell stories, because neuroscientists found out that our brain is not a logic processor, but it's a story processor. So emotion and not logic helps human brains to navigate the options and arrive at a decision. So of course it's important to explain the data and explore raw data, but the data can give only the what, but only humans can know the why and the so what behind the data. So good charts are okay to present the information and help the audience understand it, but not always these charts translate into compelling data stories. So we have to, as I said, complement the visual with a strong narrative. And in this way, we can explain the audience why this data matter. So, as I said, thanks to this data storytelling process, we can help people connect with the data in a personal way, because the data storytelling process creates like a bridge between the data, the raw data, the visuals, and the human mind, the emotions. Data storytelling can also help in illustrate the impact, because given the context, we enhance the significance and the importance of the data. And of course, we encourage informed decisions. Data storytelling is also important because it simplifies complexity. We already said that visuals are useful to simplify complexity from the raw data from tables, but this is an additional step that can help in communicating information also to not statisticians, to people that are not skilled in statistics, and we can communicate information in a simple and effective way. Next, I will hand over to my colleague Farial. She will explain about why objectivity matters. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martina, and hello, everybody. It's nice to see you all here. You can see each other in your attendees, but I see a large group here. Thank you for joining and you're interested in this training. So I'd be talking about why objectivity matters, also because many of us here who are here in this room have some role in the production of data in official statistics, be it in communication or through communication expertise or a data analyst or a statistician, but we are joining here today as a member of the National Statistical System, and we have an obligation to maintain objectivity. The power of storytelling is that it simplifies things for the audience, but that obviously comes at a risk as well, that we have to make sure that we're sending the right message to ensure that we still have the public interest and credibility so that we're not creating a bias with our data and presenting the data as it is. And that's where objectivity matters. It helps ensures reliability for stakeholders and policymakers. It maintains agency reputation. As the members of the NSS, it's our obligation to maintain public trust and credibility in a way to minimize bias. And that's where my second point comes from and links with is that we enhance accuracy by minimizing bias in our analysis and what we present to the audience so that it is not presented in a way that it's misinterpreted. And we saw many examples of this during COVID times as well, when the data was being used in news articles a lot, and also in the current times where there's a political unrest all over the world in different regions. So we have to make sure we present information in an unbiased way without supporting a certain side, be it political, religious, or any other a group. Then it supports better outcomes. The information we present in simple ways has a high likelihood of being picked up by users. And this is where we have to be very careful because of the increased uptake of information through simplified data stories that we put together. So and that's a key point. If you see over here in the figure here that we have the objective data and then we have the clear narrative. So we have to maintain a balance by keeping and presenting the information in an unbiased way, so that the information that we're presenting does not quickly escalate into political issues or misinformation. Next slide, please. And as you're familiar with the fundamental principle of official statistics, at the end, this is what we have to adhere to. And here on the screen, you see the 4 principles that directly link with the idea of objectivity. And that's something that we have to be very careful with, without jumping onto conclusions. We have to keep the data in mind and present it in a way which keeps the true sanctity of data as is. For example, the principle 1 is about relevance, impartiality, and equal access. And it says that the official statistics that meet the test of practical utility are to be compiled and made available on an impartial basis. On principle 2, on professional standards and ethics, if you see the last bit of the sentence, it says, retaining trust in official statistics, including on presentation of statistical data. So our role does not only stop from collection, processing, and storage, but also on the presentation of statistical data because of the consequences it has. Number 3, we have accountability and transparency, and this is to facilitate correct interpretation of data. And statistical agencies are to present information according to the scientific standards on the sources, methods, and procedures. And also prevention of misuse, not to comment on erroneous interpretation or misuse of statistics. And we'll get a little bit more about how we interpret it and keeping it objective. Next slide, please. And why objectivity matters, another reason, this is a concrete example of how we interpret data and the message that we can give from the same graph. For example, if you see on the total crime in the EU member states between 1998 to 2007, from the top graph, you see that there's a big kind of bump you see in their graph, and it looks like during 2002 to 2003, the crime significantly increased, reaching a peak before a significant decline. But if you look at the bottom graph and you change the legend on the y-axis, you see that there's not much of a difference across the years. It's really changing the visual from access starting from 0 compared to starting at a higher number. It immediately changes what the audience sees. And it may be clear to me and you, but if you're talking about an audience that is not familiar in terms of reading with reading graphs, or even sometimes, even if I'm familiar with reading graphs, if I quickly see this image, the first image in a news article, without paying much attention, coursing through it, I would immediately think that, oh my God, the crime has increased significantly during this time. So because we have such a small attention span that we really have to utilize what time we have with the audience for them to capture the information. Next slide, please. Then also something that we have to be very careful about, that correlation does not mean causation. For example, a very concrete example we have here is on the top graph where we see the per capita cheese consumption. So that's the red line. And then we have the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets, which is very much overlapping with the per capita cheese consumption. We cannot conclude here that people who are eating more cheese are more likely to get tangled in bed sheets. If any one of you have that case, please write in the chat. I'd be very curious to know if you have followed that pattern. I certainly don't, but there may be outliers, or maybe this is a pattern that we're not aware of. But regardless, we need a big sample size to conclude that, even if that is the case. So we need more analysis to understand statistical relationships, and coincidental patterns must be identified and filtered, but obviously we need to have some context to it. And that's what Martina mentioned in her earlier slide, that sometimes coincidental patterns exist, but without having context, we cannot develop a story. And time series are particularly vulnerable to false correlations, which is very evident from this graph. Similarly, if you see the bottom graph, you see that trend again, but that doesn't mean that there's a pattern between shaved heads and sales of razors. And I'm sure there are many other examples such as that. Then if you see here in the next slide, you see that sometimes we tend to have very complex visuals. And this is something that was covered in the earlier sessions on developing a visual. Visual needs to be simple, where it can be interpreted easily by the audience. If we're presenting complex visuals such as this one without a message, it's not serving a purpose. And if you see here that there's a map here on the right-hand side where you see a legend, and you see different colors representing the temperature. And if you see here in zone 1, you see at 3 p.m. there's a number, and at 4 p.m. there's a number. But firstly, there's a lot of errors here. I can't see the legend to begin with. So that's something that, we would have to put like a legend, what it is measuring. For example, on top, you see temperature 3 to 4 p.m., but temperature in what? Is it Fahrenheit, Celsius? And then it's not telling a story, because if I were to look at this and I see that 3 p.m. it's 8612 and at 4 p.m. 8658, I don't see much of a difference here. I don't have a story to tell, unless I want to share a story where there is no change. But what am I giving to the audience here? There's no context. And it's not a data story, because we don't have a key message that we're giving from this visual. Next slide, please. And here is the same data that tells us a story. For example, you see here, there's a New York City heat mapping study finds that higher temperatures in lower income neighborhoods. If you see here, I'm connecting this back to the slide on that correlation does not mean causation. We're not here saying that higher temperatures lead to lower income neighborhoods. We're only making a correlation here that higher temperatures in lower income neighborhood. There's no causation that lower income is leading to higher temperature and vice versa. And that is where you need more scientific evidence. As statisticians or producers of data and statistics, our duty is to understand, collect data, process, and present objective data, making sure that we have the quality checks in place and the data is validated to the extent possible and meets the quality standards, but not that we have to provide a causation effect. That is something in most cases, it's a role of economists or policy analysts or decision makers who are working in the policy space, unless, of course, there's some independent part within your organization that is responsible to run certain analysis on causation. Why is it a story is because it has a key message. It's making a correlation between higher temperatures and lower income neighborhood. The data has been cross-examined. There's a larger context. For instance, it's giving in the beginning an introductory of what point we're trying to make here. And then the facts align with data, objectively showing where some neighborhoods of the city are higher, they're hotter, and that's why it's a data story. Next slide, please. So a good data story, to summarize, should be relevant for the audience. The content include visuals and needs to match the audience's current level of data literacy and the knowledge of the topic. And in our first session, we also covered the different kind of users that we have. So for example, we have journalists, we have policy analysts, we have students, we have general public. We need to think about who we are presenting this information for and who is it useful for. And then the story has to be based on good data. That's our unique selling point as the members of the National Statistical System. The data should be from a reputable source and collected in a way that appropriately represents what is needed to tell an objective data story. Then deliver a clear and compelling story, having a clear, robust storyline coupled with a clear, powerful title, well-structured key message that brings out the meaning of the data for the audience. And then complementing it including charts, graphs, icons, photos, and that is something that you all are equipped by now with the various sources and tools that you have from the previous sessions. So this module really brings all of it together, how to utilize the visuals and graphs and putting it together to deliver the final product to the audience. Yes, so thank you very much. I'll pass it on to Nicholas now, who's going to talk about how we practically develop the story. So over to you, Nicholas.
Great, thanks. I'll just go through the key steps to putting together your data story. So now you've seen the reason why you should have a data story. Now I'll go through the steps to setting that up. And perhaps in the next slide, we can look at the model that we're proposing. That's a pyramid model. So it's very simple. It's first starting with a key message and then supporting that with evidence and supporting details. So a really simple approach that allows you to start strong with a key message. This is well adapted to today's social media and very quick readership online that allows you to really get your key message first so that people right away know what your story is about and then can continue reading to get more information. In the next slide, we can see the way that this would be laid out. For example, if you have 3 pieces of evidence, sometimes you'll have more, sometimes you'll have a little bit less. But the idea is to, once again, start off with that key message and then find 3 pieces of evidence that align and support that key message with more details for each of those. So that is a very, very simple formula, and we've set up a workbook to allow you to then develop stories using this model to make it simple and easy for you to really map out your stories. In the next slide is the first point, and you've talked about this in the first module, which is defining your target audience and making sure that the people that you're speaking to are going to be understanding your key message and understanding the data that you are presenting. So first, who are your target audiences? So, of course, they can be journalists, policymakers, civil society or business, academia, or even your own citizens. And so, first, it's important to define your audience. And then, of course, to make sure that the language that you're using is going to be understandable for them, that you're not going to use overly technical words or jargon, which is very easy, I think, for us to sometimes use language that we're used to um, hearing and seeing. And then, of course, for students or journalists or policymakers, they may not have the knowledge, the technical knowledge that you have. So it's finding the right words and finding the right way to define that. In the next slide, of course, what I'm doing is I'm highlighting the facts, the first session, which was the double diamond model, to when you are looking at how you are going to build your data visualizations to understand and remember this double diamond model so that you're using that discovery that you did at the beginning to really align as well with the story that you're telling. So in the next slide, then, we can look at once you've defined your target audience, is defining then your key message. So if you have a series of data points and data visualizations that you've developed, what is the key message, the main thing that you want people to remember when they read your data story? What is its significance? And what is the key factor that you want your audience to remember? So first, what you should have been doing is looking at identifying different patterns or outliers. So different issues that can showcase why this data is important, and then contextualizing it. So aligning it with the issues, the national issues, and also the audience interests, and to really try to bring that all together into one theme, so that it is something that makes sense, and they can really understand with that key message how the data then relates all together for your data story. So in the next slide, we'll see, for example, one data story that comes from Portugal, where I'm living right now, which was the state of the environment in 2022. Their key message was, backed by data, that 2022 was the hottest year in the last 92 years. So they gathered data to support that key message. Greenhouse gas emissions increased. They also had a large population increase, and also rural fires had a major impact during that year and increased the emissions in the country. Having said that, as statisticians and as Farial mentioned, it's important to keep a balanced approach and also show different points that can also give a bigger picture. So there was, however, some positive news. For example, in the case of over 10% of reduction of fossil fuel products, renewable energy increasing, and also environmental investments increasing. So you can, however, even though maybe your main topic and your main message is that it's the hottest year of the last almost 100 years, you can still say that there is progress being made, which gives you a more balanced story and something that is not only skewed to one side, so that you have a story that's objective and balanced. So in the next slide, is really finding what are the supporting evidence arguments, or what is the supporting evidence that allows your audience to understand the context. So this allows you then to strengthen your message and show what are the different data trends and different data points, and it allows you to then clarify the key message that you made and give some context. So, for example, it can be a global context, looking at comparing your country to other regions or other countries, and also having a comparison with a timeline. So, for example, last year and this year, and to try to sort of give that story a little bit more depth. So it's not just an isolated fact, but something that has more context, and can be more understandable for the reader, where they can see something that allows them to understand the overall importance of that data. Sometimes you can also even make comparisons, like, let's say, saying that, this, um, perhaps if you're talking about forest fires, you can say this, there have been forest fires the size of, 22 football fields, for example, so that people can also visualize the size of the forest fires and the amount of impact that the forest fires had. So trying to find ways in which people can really visualize that data as well. In the next slide, so continuing on, the supporting evidence is essentially, you're going to have a lot of data. You're going to have a lot of data points and a lot of things. So the important thing is to choose which data you want to focus on, which comparisons you want to focus on, according to your target audience and according to the message that you want to give, according to the key message that we defined earlier. So that it really aligns, and so you're able to draw comparisons that are relevant for your story, not just drawing any kind of comparisons. So in the case here of the data on the reduction of stunting, there's a lot of data here, whether it's a global or regional data comparison with different years. So I think it's choosing first, which ones are relevant for you, and then digging into that and finding really what is the story and what is the key message. In the next slide, then, is trying to sort of humanize it. So if we go to the next slide, sorry, hold on a sec. It's, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Is trying to sort of give some examples and quotes. So if you want people to really relate to your story, is to try to have some case studies or testimonials, different things that are going to bring your story alive. And finally, as well, to have some quotes from subject matter experts or people that have been affected, so that you can have a human element to your story, so that the data is then supported by case studies or by quotes. So this really gives kind of like more of the human side, and allows people to understand and see, what is happening behind the data. So thank you. In the next slide, then finally is adapting it for social media and trying to find ways that will get people's attention. As you know, on social media, people have a very short attention span. So how can you pique their interest? So these are different posts from the United Nations Instagram feed that try to help people to visualize very quickly, data and what is at stake or what is the issue. The one on the right is even like is actually a visualization that moves so that each point grows and grows and grows. So it's really finding ways to help people visualize, maybe in an animated format, some of the data that you're talking about, to encourage them to learn more, to encourage them to click through. So trying to find some different ways to pique their interest. Hopefully, you will have found something because you have a strong key message, because you're doing something that is relatable to your audience, then you're able to find the right message that will get their interest on social media. And in the next, so in conclusion, I think it's really trying to develop that mindset change. It's going from data analysis, that is a bottom up process. So, really something where you're really gathering, if you remember that Lego design, which was really gathering all the data and trying to make sense of the data. So, in this case, it's really a top down process. It's really once you have the data, then trying to find ways in which you can humanize and tell data stories, give meaning to the data, and select the right data that allows you to really have a compelling story that is going to have an impact, that is going to communicate a strong message that people will remember. And so that's where you talk about the what and the so what. And so in the next slide, I'll just add to that. Which is that, just to summarize, first, first is setting, of course, that objective. So once you have all the data, is trying to find that meaning, what is the key message, and developing then that narrative. So finding ways in which you're going to be able to showcase the visualization to support your story. So it's not the other way around where where the story is supports the visualization. You should be first looking at the key message and the data that you want to present, and then developing that visualization. So that will allow you then to have something that really is a quite powerful, because you have a story that is supported by great visualization, and that will then allow you to really connect with your audience. So really have something where they will right away grasp some perhaps complex issues thanks to the work that you have done. And finally, of course, it's advocating for your story. So making sure that you have those social media visuals, making sure that you have a way that is going to be communicating your story across different channels on your website, and having that clear message will really help you when you spread the message across email, social media, and on your website. So that's hopefully a good overview. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments.
Feel free to write in chat, or I believe we can also give speaking rights if somebody wants to come in. I'd like to open to the audience here. If you could share any story that you have developed, if you want to share your experience in developing the story, I think it would be interesting to hear from your experiences. Or if there's a story that was developed by your office and you can anonymize information there, but something that was picked up quickly by a user and misused it in a way that your office had to deal with. Okay. Nicholas, I'd suggest that if we can go over the workbook that you have developed, and we can go through that.
Mm-hmm. Would you like me to share my screen then?
Yes, if you can, please.
Okay,
Thank
yeah.
you.
All right. So great. So if everyone can see my screen, what I've done is I've created a workbook that will allow you to then uh, bring together all your ideas into a data story in a structured manner. So first, um, it summarizes the structure that we talked about today, that looks at the story arc, the pyramid structure, as we mentioned, that starts with a key message followed by evidence and supporting details. And this is once again an example of the way that you could set this up if you have three pieces of evidence to support your key message. What I've done is the PDF that will be sent to you has allows you to then work directly in the PDF. So it's a you can start, you know, typing directly in the PDF if you like. And so what I've done is I've tried to take a step-by-step approach. First, by choosing the theme, because I think it's important for you to be focused when you're telling a story so that it only focuses on one theme and one major area. So that you are then going to be, if you talk about the economy, you're talking about the economy and not talking necessarily about environment or climate data, so that your story isn't all over the place. I think we have a tendency to sometimes when we have a lot of data to really want to talk about everything and anything, and that means that then our message is diluted. So what I encourage you to do is first to explore which for your story, which is the theme, and so to align it with one of these here, which are, I think the key themes that usually statistics offices will be focused on. So once you have that theme and the main area, then you can determine and define what is your key message. So if you have a key theme, for example, that, as we mentioned, looks at environmental and climate data, and you have looked and brought together pieces of data around the climate change in your country, or the impact of floods or something like that, then you should be looking at, with all these pieces of data, what is your key message? What is it that you want to be people to remember? And once you have that key message, then you're able to then bring together the key pieces of evidence. And here, what I'm suggesting is that you first only develop the outline. You don't need to write everything all at once, but, you know, to write the key points, that are going, the key pieces of evidence that are going to support your key message. And then once you have that, then you can also give supporting details. So more supporting details on those points here. So this is just going to be like bullet points, for example. And then here you may have a little bit more information here where you go into a little bit more detail. So once you have this, then you already have the structure that we talked about, which is the pyramid structure, where you start with the key message and then have some two or three or four key points, key pieces of evidence, and then the supporting details that are going to support your evidence. Following that, as I mentioned, to try to humanize and to try to bring life to your story, I encourage you to write a few quotes and testimonials that you would like to illustrate your story. Or it can be, as I mentioned, a case study or something that allows people to see the impact on the ground. Now, after, of course, once you finish the story, these quotes have to be approved. So you can start writing them, however, and, put together something that you will then send to someone, either a representative from the government or someone from your own statistics agency, that can then, after that, approve or disapprove or change your suggested quote. What this does is it allows you to get some comments without having to do a full interview, for example. It allows you to get some comments on the story that are aligned with the story. Just to get that conversation started. Then writing the title, I think sometimes we ended up trying to write a title that is going to be a little bit too long, or that is going to be trying to tell everything about the story. So sometimes it's finding the key, using that key message and finding something that is going to get people's attention, that is going to be short. So usually 18 to 14 words is ideal for a title. And so something that leaves people wanting to find out more. And finally, here is a space if you want to write a tweet about the story. And here there's a link here for a character count if you need to write a tweet, or as a post, as it is called now on X. This is a good exercise also because even for other social media channels like Facebook or LinkedIn, because it encourages you to write something short and condensed that is that can also be used across other channels. And then finally, of course, don't forget the picture. Don't forget to find, some pictures. Of course, you may have some great graphs, and you may have some nice infographics and visualizations. But if you're talking about something that is, impacting people, impacting communities, what are some images or pictures that you can use to really show, the personal side, the human side of the story? And finally, here I'm suggesting that once you write your story and before you present it to your manager, that you talk to it, you present it to someone either from your family or a friend that can then listen to your story and hear, do they understand the story? Do they understand the key issue and the key message? What did they get out of it? Because this is a great way when you explain it out loud, where you can realize actually maybe, I'm saying something that's a little bit too technical, or maybe I need to rephrase this sentence, or maybe I need to give more examples. So it's a great way when you talk about it, talk out loud. It's a great way for you to see if it's really going to gel and connect with a different audience that is not from the statistics agency. And of course, as we mentioned today, just to summarize, it's really bringing together data visualizations and storytelling is really, really powerful. So I encourage you to use this power that you have at your disposal. Thank you very much.
Responsibly. But
Yes,
use the power responsibly.
responsibly and objectively.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nicholas. I'd like to open again for any questions and if any comments. I'd also like to share an example from the SG report that we at UN Statistics Division have prepared every year, and many of you must have seen those reports as well. Because that's an excellent example of how we present our stories to the world while keeping it objective, because us as UNSD also don't have the roles to make policy conclusions. That's not our job. So we receive the data from all the countries, and then at the regional level and at the global level, and we present that data objectively. So let me show you a good example on the reports. Once I can share my screen. Okay. Just bear with me for. All right. So I'm just going to give you a few examples from this report. So this is the latest report that we have on the Sustainable Development Goals. So this report provides the progress on each of the Sustainable Development Goal and picking up few key indicators that have a story. So the way it is developed, for example, I'll go to the chapter that I worked on this year, for example, on zero hunger. So if you see here, we have in zero hunger in SDG, which is SDG 2, we have a number of indicators. But if you see here in the story, we are not presenting all of the indicator progress, because all indicators do not tell a story every year. If there's no change, sometimes no change is also a story, but we have to prioritize where we want to gauge the attention of our users for them to react and then take action in order to improve the circumstances on poverty, malnourishment, and food insecurity. For example, this story that we see here is on indicator 241, which is on the sustainable productive and sustainable agriculture. So we have the headline here, and this is in the same vein as what Nicholas mentioned, that we have the storyline, let's say a very enticing title here, that accelerated action could bring productive and sustainable agriculture within reach globally. And then we have here the state is in achieving the productive and sustainable agriculture. We give the footnotes. We have the score between 1 and 5, and then because this is a global report, we're giving a breakdown by region, by the least developed, landlocked, and small island, and then the 7 regions that we have. And then one of the key things that we focus on is whenever we are writing a story, the information that we're presenting in the narrative is supported by the graph or visual that we have. So we're complementing visually as well as presenting a narrative and giving a bit of the context based on literature. We're not, for example, we have here productive and sustainable agriculture is key to ensuring the attainment of continued satisfaction of human needs in present and future generations. This is not our conclusion. This is something that we have learned or picked up from other UN reports, but this is not the conclusion of our data. So that is why these are mentioned at the beginning, where we're giving some sort of context at the beginning, then presenting the data. The data from 2012 suggested that the world was at a moderate distance from achieving productive and sustainable agriculture. So if you see how the data itself is quite a complex index or number, but we have summarized it in a simpler way, which is that we're a little moderate distance from achieving. So that's somebody who does not understand the numbers as well or doesn't communicate with numbers as effectively can understand it in text. And then we've made this comparison with the regional disparities, but again, we're not talking about what factors have led to those disparities, because that requires further investigation. So I encourage all of you to have a look at this report. I can also share this in chat. And then this presents very good examples, and we follow the same protocols as we mentioned in this presentations on how to maintain objectivity but presenting information in a useful way. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Stop share. Okay, here you go. Andre was quick in sending the link in the chat. So yes, yes, that's it for me. Martina, Nicholas, would you have anything else to add? Okay.
I would like to add that there is also another UNSD resource. It's a storytelling guide for VNRs and SDGs reporting. I can quickly show you this guide. One second. Yes, so this guide has been developed by UNSD, and it gives you some tools and instruments to develop your story, especially for the voluntary national reviews and for SDG reporting. Some of the material that we presented here during this presentation has been taken from this guide. It's powerful because it has a lot of useful information to develop your story, but it also has some links that you can follow to explore more content and more information. You have all the process to develop a story, the analysis of the audience. You have the steps to construct your story. This is what Nicolas presented. You have examples of what is a good story and what is not a good story. What matters for the audience and what doesn't matter. And yes, there is a guide on how to make these materials friendlier to the audience. There is the storyline part that help you in understanding how you can select the information from the charts and the graph you have developed. Yes, so here you have all the tools to proceed with your first data story. I'm scrolling down just to give you an overview of what is inside the guide, but I will send you the link in chat so you can explore. Yes. Yeah, that's it from my side. Also here you have a lot of resources that you can further explore. These are not UNSD sources, but of course they are being cleared by UNSD, so you can also have a look and find inspiration from these new sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any final questions before we close the session or comments? Okay. Then thank you very much, Martina. I'll hand it over to you to close.
Yes. So thank you everyone for joining this session, and thank you so much for joining us in all this journey from the beginning, from the basics of data visualization to the final story that you can create with your visuals. And we hope that this training has been useful for you, and we hope that you will be able to develop visuals and stories based on what you have learned during this training. Now you have all the tools. You have resources, so you will be able to produce effective visualizations and stories. Yes, so thank you again, and hope to see you again in the next training. Faria, you're muted. I see you're speaking.
Yes. Andre, would you like to come in quickly? I saw you sent a message also on the
Yes, thank you, Fario. So while this is the last session in the training, it's not a definitive goodbye from us. You will still receive a few emails from me, and those will include additional information about our post-training survey, where we'd just like to learn more about what your experience was during those 4 sessions. And we'll also be in touch with you with your certificates in case you've been to at least 3 out of the 4 different modules that we've had. If any issues, always please contact me or Fario, or ideally both. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So let us know. So this is a goodbye for now, but speak soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.